4 bodies were found, and a suspect, still unidentified by investigators, was taken into custody. Augustin says they never heard or saw anything that would indicate a tragedy had occurred.
Imagine living in a community designed by Disney. Perfect streets, cheerful neighbors, and homes that look like they belong in a fairy tale. Celebration, Florida was built to be paradise, a place where families could live their best lives just minutes from the Magic Kingdom. But in December 2019, one home in this picture-perfect neighborhood became the scene of unspeakable horror. When federal agents and deputies entered 202 Reserve Place on January 13, 2020, they expected to serve a simple arrest warrant. What they found instead would haunt them forever. Inside the master bedroom, wrapped in blankets and arranged almost ceremonially, lay the decomposed bodies of an entire family. A mother, 3 young children, and even the family dog, all gone. The smell was so overwhelming that investigators had to step outside repeatedly. The youngest victim's body was so badly decomposed that officers initially didn't even see her tiny form beneath her mother's feet. But here's what makes this case truly disturbing. The person responsible had been living in that house with those bodies for weeks. He walked among them, slept near them, existed in that space while his family decomposed around him. When agents finally confronted him on that January morning, he stumbled out of the house, shaking and convulsing, looking like he'd seen a ghost, or perhaps like he'd become one himself. The victims? 42-year-old Megan, a loving mother and former yoga instructor. 13-year-old Alexander, a bright young teenager. 11-year-old Tyler, full of energy and dreams. And 4-year-old Zoe, barely old enough to understand what life meant. Even their beloved dog Breezy wasn't spared. This wasn't a case of sudden rage or a terrible accident. Evidence would reveal something far more calculated. The victims had been given toxic amounts of Benadryl, enough to sedate them, to make them vulnerable. Then they were harmed with weapons while they were unable to defend themselves. Each child was found gripping a crucifix in their hands, arranged as if for some twisted final ceremony. Medical examiners determined the family had been gone since late December, meaning someone had spent Christmas and New Year's living with their bodies. Mail piled up on the porch. An eviction notice was posted on the door. Family members sent increasingly worried text messages that went unanswered. Yet the person inside that house remained, surrounded by death, until authorities finally forced their way in. The questions that demand answers. Who could do this to their own family? What drives someone to take the lives of innocent children? How does a seemingly normal physical therapist and soccer coach transform into someone capable of such evil? And perhaps most chilling of all, what was he doing during those weeks he spent alone with the bodies? The answers are more disturbing than you could imagine. This is the story of how a dream home in paradise became a tomb. This is the story of financial fraud, apocalyptic delusions, and a family destroyed from within. This is the story of Anthony Todt. A love story turned tragedy. Anthony Todt seemed like the American dream personified. He met Megan in college. She was a physical therapist and yoga instructor, and they fell in love over their shared passion for helping others. They married, started a physical therapy clinic together in Connecticut, and built what appeared to be a wonderful life. Anthony volunteered as a youth soccer coach and worked with disabled children. The couple had 3 beautiful children, Alexander, Tyler, and Zoe. Neighbors in Connecticut knew them as an active, engaged family. The children were encouraged to pursue arts and music. Anthony was the dedicated dad, always there for his kids' activities. Megan was the nurturing mother who gave up her career to raise their children full-time. From the outside, they had everything. But beneath this perfect surface, cracks were forming. In 2017, the Todt family made a significant decision. They purchased a home in Celebration, Florida, the master-planned community developed by Disney, located just miles from Walt Disney World. The town was designed to be idyllic, with its pastel-colored homes, white picket fences, and family-friendly atmosphere. It seemed like the perfect place to raise children. The arrangement was unusual but workable. Megan and the children would live in Florida full-time, while Anthony continued operating their physical therapy clinic in Connecticut, flying down to Celebration on weekends to be with his family. 2 homes, 2 states, one family trying to make it all work. This is when Megan's health allegedly began to decline. According to Anthony's later claims, she contracted Lyme disease after a tick bite during a Disney World trip. She suffered from bouts of depression and became more reserved, more isolated. The vibrant yoga instructor seemed to fade away. But there was something else happening. Something Anthony was hiding from everyone, including his own family. By April 2019, federal investigators had uncovered a shocking truth. Anthony Todt was billing his physical therapy patients for treatments they never received. It wasn't a small mistake or an accounting error. He had defrauded clients of over $130,000. Where was all this stolen money going? Into maintaining their two homes, the Connecticut property and the expensive Celebration residence. Into frequent trips to Disney World. Into keeping up appearances of a successful, thriving family when the reality was very different. Anthony had also taken out significant loans from firms in New York City to fund this double life. When he couldn't pay them back, they sued him. By 2019, he was over $100,000 in debt, drowning in financial obligations with no way out. The walls were closing in. Federal investigators were building their case. Landlords were demanding rent. Creditors were calling. And worst of all, Megan and the children had no idea. They believed everything was fine. They trusted him completely. Anthony's weight ballooned. He was diagnosed with diabetes. The stress of maintaining his lies was literally consuming him from the inside out. Every year, the Todt family would return to Connecticut for the winter months. The children loved the snow and winter sports. It was their tradition, their normal rhythm of life. But in December 2019, something changed. The family stayed in Celebration. No explanation was given to relatives. No plans were shared. They just stayed. This was the month when Anthony's carefully constructed world would completely collapse, and he would make a decision that would destroy 5 lives, including his own. According to what Anthony would later tell investigators, he and Megan had been watching videos about the afterlife. They discussed what happens when people pass away. And somehow, in Anthony's deteriorating mental state and desperate circumstances, a horrific plan took shape. He would later claim that he believed the apocalypse was coming, that the family needed to pass over to the other side together, that this was somehow an act of love, of keeping the family together for eternity. The details are difficult to process, but they're essential to understanding what happened in that Celebration home. Anthony obtained large quantities of Benadryl, a common over-the-counter medication that, in high doses, causes sedation and loss of consciousness. He apparently gave toxic amounts to Megan and the children, though exactly how remains unclear. Some reports suggest it was mixed into food. Once they were sedated and defenseless, he used weapons to harm them. Medical examiners later found that Megan had been harmed with deep wounds to her abdomen, at least 8 inches deep. Alexander and Tyler both had similar injuries. 4-year-old Zoe showed no signs of weapon trauma, suggesting she may have been suffocated while unconscious from the medication. In his initial confession to detectives, Anthony described going into each child's room. He admitted to placing a pillow over little Zoe's face and holding it there until she stopped moving. "I needed to save her soul," he told investigators. "I wanted her to be with us." For the 2 boys, Alexander and Tyler, he described suffocating them and then using weapons on them afterward. The medical examiner would later testify that the weapon injuries appeared to be inflicted after the victims had already passed away, a detail that would become crucial during the trial. As for Megan, Anthony's story kept changing. In one version, they planned it together, and she harmed herself. In another, he helped her pass away after she failed in her attempt. In yet another version, he would tell later, she was solely responsible for harming the children. The family dog, Breezy, was also ended, stabbed and left with the family. Each victim was found with a crucifix placed in their hands, arranged as if for some religious ceremony. They were wrapped in blankets and placed together in the master bedroom, creating a macabre final resting place. What Anthony Todt did next might be even more disturbing than the crimes themselves. He stayed in that house. For weeks, estimates suggest at least 2 to 3 weeks, he lived among the decomposing bodies of his wife, children, and dog. He didn't flee. He didn't turn himself in. He simply existed there. During this time, family members in Connecticut grew increasingly concerned. They sent text messages that went unanswered or received strange, evasive responses. On December 29, 2019, relatives asked police to conduct a welfare check. Officers knocked on the door of 202 Reserve Place, but received no response. Following protocol, they left. Meanwhile, signs of trouble were mounting outside the home. Mail piled up on the porch, uncollected. Bills went unpaid. The landlord, after not receiving the December rent payment of $4,921, filed eviction paperwork on December 22nd. Inside, Anthony later claimed he attempted to end his own life multiple times during those weeks. He said he overdosed on Benadryl at least 8 times, hoping to join his family in whatever afterlife he believed awaited them. "I just wanted to be with my family," he would later testify. But he survived, and he remained in that house, in conditions that investigators would describe as unimaginable. On January 13, 2020, federal agents from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services arrived at 202 Reserve Place. They weren't there to investigate any family tragedy. They were there to arrest Anthony Todt on healthcare fraud charges related to his Connecticut physical therapy practice. The agents had been monitoring the house for hours. They finally saw Anthony emerge onto the porch. Witnesses described him as stumbling, convulsing, barely able to walk properly. He went back inside before they could approach him. When agents finally made contact, Anthony's behavior was bizarre. He told them Megan was upstairs sleeping. He called out to her as if she were alive. When asked about the children, he said he couldn't remember if they'd gone to a sleepover. Everything about his demeanor set off alarm bells. Obtaining a key from the landlord, authorities entered the home and were immediately hit with an overpowering odor, the unmistakable smell of decomposition. Following the scent, they entered the master bedroom. What they found was beyond comprehension. Wrapped in blankets, arranged together in the bed, were the bodies of Megan, Alexander, and Tyler. The level of decomposition was severe. Investigators described the bodies as black as leather. The family dog was also discovered, showing signs of violent harm. But where was Zoe? The 4-year-old was missing from the horrific scene. Officers searched frantically, fearing the worst. Finally, they found her. Her tiny body was so severely decomposed that it had been hidden beneath Megan's feet. She was so small, so degraded by time, that they'd initially missed her entirely. Each victim was found holding a crucifix. The scene suggested some kind of ritual or ceremony had taken place. Investigators photographed everything, documented the positions of the bodies, and began the grim task of processing what would become one of Florida's most disturbing crime scenes. Anthony was immediately taken into custody. He was also transported to the hospital because he'd apparently taken some dosage of Benadryl and made comments about harming himself. In the days following his arrest, Anthony Todt gave a recorded confession to detectives. The interview would become critical evidence in his eventual trial. Sitting across from investigators, Anthony described what he claimed happened in chilling detail. He said that he and Megan had planned for the family to pass away together because they believed the end of the world was coming. He said they'd discussed it, that she'd agreed, and that they'd even talked to the children about it. According to this version, the kids had said, "We want to be gone with you." He described going into Zoe's room first, placing his hands over her mouth and a pillow over her face, holding it there until she stopped moving. He talked about it with an eerie calmness, as if describing a difficult but necessary task. For his sons, he said he suffocated them and then used weapons on them. He claimed Megan tried to harm herself with a weapon but couldn't go through with it fully, so he helped her by suffocating her afterward. He said he laid in bed next to her after she passed away. Throughout the confession, Anthony maintained that this was about control, about bringing the children into this world, so he should be in control of when they left it. He said it was about the family staying together forever, about protecting them from whatever apocalyptic future he'd convinced himself was coming. But this confession was just the beginning of Anthony's ever-changing story. Dr. Jennifer Nara, the associate medical examiner, revealed that all 4 family members died from homicidal violence combined with toxic levels of diphenhydramine, the active ingredient in Benadryl. Megan had sustained 2 deep wounds to her abdomen, 8 inches deep. Alexander and Tyler had similar injuries. Little Zoe showed no weapon trauma, suggesting she'd been suffocated while unconscious. The medical examiner estimated they'd been gone since mid to late December 2019. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing family history. When Anthony was just 4 years old in 1980, his own father, Robert Todt, had hired someone to end his mother Loretta's life. She survived the attack, but Robert was convicted. Now, decades later, the son who'd been spared from violence had become the perpetrator of it. Anthony Todt was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of animal cruelty. The trial began in April 2022 at the Osceola County Courthouse. Assistant State Attorney Danielle Pinnell presented a straightforward case. Anthony's recorded confession, the physical evidence, and the undeniable fact that he'd lived with the bodies for weeks. The defendant wanted control, Pinnell told the jury. They brought the kids into this world, and he believed he should be in control of when they leave this world. But in a stunning move, Anthony took the stand and completely changed his story. Now he claimed he came home to find his children already gone. He said Megan confessed to giving them Benadryl pudding pie before harming them, then harmed herself. He testified he'd initially confessed to protect Megan's memory. The prosecution reminded the jury that Anthony had changed his story multiple times. If Megan had truly done this, why would he stay in that house for weeks without calling police? After more than 6 hours of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict on April 14, 2022. The sentencing hearing at Osceola County Courthouse was packed with family members, friends, and media representatives, all waiting to hear what punishment would be handed down. Judge Keith Karsten didn't hold back. "You, Anthony John Todt, are a destroyer of worlds," he declared from the bench. The phrase captured the enormity of what Anthony had done. He had completely erased entire futures and shattered a family that could never be rebuilt. The sentence was severe: 4 consecutive life sentences without any possibility of parole, 1 for each family member. The consecutive nature meant they would run one after another, ensuring absolutely no chance of early release. In an unusual move that drew nationwide attention, Judge Karsten added 1 additional year specifically for the family dog, Breezy. This sent a powerful message. Every single life in that house mattered. Before sentencing, Megan's aunt Cynthia Kopko addressed the court with tears streaming down her face. "It's been a nightmare for 2.5 years, she said. "Tony crushed his whole family by doing this. Megan was the gentlest person. All I have now is pictures and memories I can hold in my heart." Cynthia described Megan as kind, caring, and devoted to her children. She had given up her career to raise Alexander, Tyler, and Zoe. She had been a yoga instructor who believed in peace and helping others. As of 2024, Anthony Todt remains incarcerated at the Santa Rosa Correctional Institution in Milton, Florida, where he will spend the rest of his life. He will never be eligible for parole or freedom. Just 5 days after sentencing, his attorneys filed an appeal challenging the judge's rulings on mental health evidence. Legal experts believe it's unlikely to succeed, given the overwhelming evidence and his own recorded confession. In July 2024, Anthony filed a federal lawsuit against Osceola County, demanding $9.9 million. His complaint? Authorities released a 27-page letter he had written to his father from jail, a letter where he blamed Megan for everything. Anthony is representing himself in this lawsuit, filing legal documents from his prison cell. He continues to proclaim his innocence despite the jury's guilty verdict and overwhelming evidence. This lawsuit has been seen as one final attempt to control the narrative and avoid taking responsibility. Celebration, Florida, the Disney-designed paradise, has had to grapple with the reality that such horror occurred within its boundaries. The community prided itself on safety and being family-friendly. The town had to confront the uncomfortable fact that an entire family was destroyed while neighbors went about their daily lives just yards away. People walked dogs past the house. Children played nearby. Families celebrated Christmas, all while the Todt family lay inside 202 Reserve Place. The case raised difficult questions. How could this happen here? Why didn't anyone notice sooner? Could something have been done to prevent it? We must never forget the most important part. The victims were real people with real lives and futures that were stolen. Alexander, 13 years old, stood on the edge of high school with his entire life ahead. He would never graduate, never go to college, never fall in love, never have a family. Tyler, 11 years old, was full of energy and curiosity. He would never become a teenager, never discover his passions, never achieve his dreams. Zoe, just 4 years old, was barely old enough to understand life. She would never start kindergarten, never learn to ride a bike, never experience childhood joys. Megan, 42 years old, was a devoted mother who had dedicated her life to raising her children. She deserved to see them grow up, to become a grandmother, to live a full life. These were real people with hopes and dreams, destroyed by someone who claimed to love them. We must remember them as the beautiful, valuable human beings they were. This heartbreaking case teaches us critical lessons about recognizing warning signs in families around us. If you notice signs of financial stress, increasing isolation, controlling behavior, depression, or sudden changes in family dynamics, please don't ignore them. Sometimes a simple conversation, a A kind gesture, or reaching out to offer support, can make all the difference. Awareness and early intervention can genuinely save lives. Share this story widely to remind others that we must all stay vigilant and work together to protect the most vulnerable members of our society, especially our children and families. Subscribe to our channel for more true crime documentaries that don't just tell stories, but educate viewers and raise awareness about recognizing danger signs, understanding psychological warning indicators, and learning how tragedies can be prevented. Together, by understanding the warning signs, recognizing the patterns of family violence, and learning about the darkness that sometimes hides behind closed doors in seemingly normal families, we can work actively to prevent future tragedies and create safer, more supportive communities for everyone. Stay alert, stay informed, support your neighbors, and never hesitate to speak up when something feels wrong. Your voice could save a life.